It was a normal day on the streets, or at least it seemed like it. But little did anyone know, a small moment of reckless aggression would soon spark a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Two cops, known for their corrupt ways and absolute power, decided to pick on the wrong person, a judge. The confrontation seemed like just another case of the system abusing its power, but this time, things would unfold differently. The judge, unassuming and calm on the outside, wasn't just any judge. He had connections, a reputation, and a deep understanding of the law. What happened next, though, shocked everyone. Just 4 minutes after the slap, those cops found themselves caught in a storm they couldn't escape. Their once unshakable empire, built on fear and corruption, began to unravel before their very eyes. What started as an arrogant display of authority quickly turned into a battle they weren't prepared for. With power struggles, secrets, and a fierce push for justice on the horizon, it was clear everything was about to change. Who would win in this game of power, and what would be the price for those who thought they were untouchable? Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. The cops, Officer Ryan and Officer Carter, had been notorious in the city for years. They were known for their ruthless tactics, bending the law to suit their own interests, and intimidating anyone who dared stand in their way. They had the power, at least. They thought they did. They had built a network of corrupt allies, from shady informants to politicians who turned a blind eye to their actions. Together, they ruled the streets with an iron fist. But their arrogance would be their downfall. The judge, Samuel Rivers, wasn't just some figurehead in the court system. He had worked his way up from humble beginnings, earning respect through years of integrity and fairness. He'd seen it all, and while most people would avoid crossing the powerful cops, Judge Rivers wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. What made him even more dangerous was his secret, a network of influential people who owed him favors, from high-ranking officials to even some in law enforcement. When Ryan and Carter decided to challenge him, they had no idea what they were really up against. As the tension grew, whispers of corruption started spreading. The moment they slapped Judge Rivers, something shifted. The law, once an unyielding force, was beginning to bend in ways no one could have predicted. And now, with every passing minute, Ryan and Carter were losing control. But who could stop them? The answer was still unclear, and the clock was ticking. As the hours passed, the atmosphere in the city shifted. The slap, seemingly a small act of aggression, had set off a series of reactions that rippled through every corner of the criminal world. Judge Rivers wasn't the only one who had connections. Ryan and Carter had always relied on fear, but now their actions were starting to have unintended consequences. What they didn't know was that Judge Rivers had already made calls before he'd even left the scene, quietly alerting a few trusted figures. Word was spreading fast, and every moment they wasted, that empire was slipping further away. Meanwhile, Ryan and Carter's phones buzzed non-stop with messages. Some of their usual allies were suddenly becoming distant, as if the very air had turned toxic. Their closest informants, once loyal, were starting to pull back, hesitant to take part in any more of their dirty work. The two officers, unnerved by the sudden shift, tried to cover their tracks, but the more they tried to clean up their mess, the bigger it became. And the more they found themselves sinking into a hole they couldn't escape. On the other side, Detective Maria Hayes, an investigator who had long suspected the corruption within the department, began to take notice. She wasn't sure what had changed, but something about the situation felt different. She had always kept a close eye on the rogue officers, waiting for a break in the case that would give her the upper hand. Now she could sense an opening. As she dug deeper, Maria uncovered pieces of a much larger puzzle, one that stretched far beyond just Ryan and Carter's antics. But with each new lead, Maria found herself at a crossroads. She had always walked a fine line, but this was different. She knew if she moved too quickly, the wrong people could come after her. If she hesitated, the power of the corrupt forces in the city might bury the truth before it even saw the light of day. She had to decide whether to go all in or back off, But the deeper she got, the more she realized there was no turning back. As tensions mounted, Ryan and Carter grew increasingly paranoid. The walls were closing in, and they couldn't tell who they could trust anymore. They'd underestimated Judge Rivers, and now they were paying the price. With every passing minute, but one thing was certain: the city was about to erupt in ways that no one could have predicted. The clash between the officers, the judge, and the unseen forces pulling the strings was far from over. And with everything hanging in the balance, everyone involved had to ask themselves, what would they sacrifice to win? The tension in the air had become suffocating. Ryan and Carter's every move was being watched, but they couldn't tell by whom. They'd tried to lay low, but the city's undercurrent of whispers and rumors was becoming too loud to ignore. Their world, once built on intimidation and control, was now crumbling, and with every passing day, the weight of their fear grew heavier. Detective Maria Hayes was getting closer, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, maybe even someone inside her own department, was feeding information to the very people she was trying to bring down. She couldn't trust anyone, not even her closest allies. She'd have followed the trail for so long, piecing together fragments of evidence, but every step she took led to more questions. And now, with the city on the brink of an explosive confrontation, Maria had to decide whether to expose everything she knew or hold off and wait for the right moment. But time was running out. In the dark corners of the city, Judge Rivers was preparing his next move. He had always been a man of strategy, biding his time, making his connections count. But the moment Ryan and Carter laid their hands on him, it had become personal. Rivers wasn't just looking for justice anymore, he was looking for vengeance. His network of allies, once hidden in the shadows, was ready to strike, and no one knew when they would show up or where they would hit. The clock was ticking, and the walls were closing in on every side. Ryan and Carter were no longer in control. Their empire, built on lies and fear, was about to meet its end. But how far would they go to protect themselves? How much would they sacrifice to hold onto their power? And could Maria make the right choice before everything unraveled completely? The city was holding its breath. Everyone knew the storm was coming. It was only a matter of time before the pieces all collided, and the fallout would be unlike anything anyone could have anticipated. The final confrontation was coming, and all anyone could do was wait for the storm to hit. Just when it seemed like the storm was about to break, something unexpected happened that shifted the entire balance. As Detective Maria Hayes dug deeper, she stumbled upon a shocking revelation, one that turned everything she thought she knew upside down. Her investigation into Ryan and Carter's corruption had always seemed straightforward, but now she discovered something that threw her off course completely. The judge, Samuel Rivers, wasn't as clean as he appeared. The judge had his own dark secrets, ties to a powerful underground syndicate that spanned far beyond the city's limits. Rivers, who had seemed like the man to take down the corrupt cops, was in fact using them as pawns in a much larger game. Maria couldn't believe it at first. She had spent years tracking down criminal networks, but this was a curveball she never saw coming. If Rivers was connected to the syndicate, then he wasn't the noble figure she believed him to be. Worse, it meant that the network of corruption in the city was even deeper, more tangled, and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The line between good and evil had blurred completely, and now Maria was caught in the middle of a fight she wasn't sure she could win. Meanwhile, Ryan and Carter, desperate to hang on to their crumbling empire, were forced to make an impossible choice. The weight of the power struggle they were part of was suffocating, and they realized they were no longer just fighting for control of the streets, they were fighting for their lives. As Rivers' influence stretched further than they thought, they started to panic, knowing that their every move was being monitored by an unseen hand. They thought they'd been the ones pulling the strings, but now they were just players in someone else's game. And as if things couldn't get more complicated, a mysterious figure from Ryan and Carter's past reappeared, a man they had wronged years ago, someone who held a personal vendetta against both of them. He had been quietly biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and now, with the city in chaos, he was ready to make his move. Now, with alliances shifting, betrayals coming to light, and enemies on all sides, the tension in the city was palpable. Every character, from the cops to the judge to the detective, had their own motivations, and everyone was about to make their final move. But who would come out on top when the dust finally settled? Would the corrupt cops keep their hold on the city? Would Rivers' empire crumble beneath his own ambition? Or would Maria's investigation uncover the truth in time to save what little justice was left? The stage was set for an explosive clash, and no one could predict who would walk away unscathed. The tension reached a breaking point. Everything had been leading up to this moment. Judge Rivers, Detective Maria Hayes, and the corrupt cops, Ryan and Carter, were all converging in one explosive showdown. But no one could have predicted how it would all unfold. Maria, with the weight of the city's future on her shoulders, had uncovered enough to take down both Ryan and Carter. The problem was, Rivers' involvement had shifted everything. He wasn't just the man she'd been fighting for justice, he was a kingpin, orchestrating an underground network that had its grip on every part of the city. It was a power play, and Maria knew she had no choice but to confront him. But just as she made her move to expose Rivers in front of the press, something unexpected happened. Ryan and Carter, knowing they were cornered, went on the offensive. But as they tried to flee, a familiar face stepped into the fray, the man from their past, the one they thought they'd silenced years ago. He wasn't there to negotiate. He wasn't there for revenge, either. He was there for something else. In a brutal twist of fate, he handed them over to Maria, revealing that he had been working undercover the entire time, feeding her the information she needed to take down the entire corrupt system. What they didn't know was that he had been following them for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. But just when it seemed like justice might finally be served, Rivers made his final move. With his back against the wall, the judge pulled a last card from his sleeve. He had been planning this moment from the beginning. Rivers wasn't just a part of the corrupt system, he had been controlling both sides. The syndicate wasn't just a criminal organization, it was a government-funded operation with corrupt officials at the highest levels. The truth shattered Maria's understanding of everything she'd been fighting for. The law wasn't a tool for justice, it was a weapon used by the powerful to maintain control. In the final, chaotic moments, it became clear that no one was walking away clean. Ryan and Carter, having thought they were in control, were now facing the consequences of their actions. Rivers, despite his clever manipulation, was finally brought down, but the syndicate was still out there, more powerful than ever. And as Maria stood there, the weight of the truth sinking in, she realized the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The city might have been shaken, but its foundations were far from broken.